So you refused to listen to Jaco. So had you heard him? Is it like, had you heard him and you were like, whatever, I refuse to listen? Was it sort of like you've been playing bass for a while, then you refused to listen to Jaco?
Okay.
Or break it down. What's going on? This is quite controversial.
Here's what happened. If I'm honest, I had a few bass teachers in the beginning. I've talked about one really actually traumatic experience I had with a bass teacher very early on, but there was another bass teacher who I only studied with a little bit. Yeah, I know, it's brutal.
Dude, brutal.
Yeah. The short version of that is I had a bass teacher that kicked me out of his little space when I was 13, and because he thought I was trying to, like show off, and it was really intense. And I think it was all derived from his insecurity. And anyway, it took me a long time to sort of understand what happened there. But there was another.
What Ian's trying to say is he was a total moron.
Yes, it's true. I mean, he was
not you. He was the bass teacher.
Yeah, the bass teacher. Yeah, he definitely did a little damage, but I've come to terms with it, and I think overall it was a net positive for me in my life. Yeah, it really made me take a look at my own, how I wanted to be as an educator. But this other bass teacher, Pete Hand, predominantly an upright player, played in the Glacier Symphony Orchestra in Kalispell, Montana, a jazz enthusiast and classical enthusiast, killer on upright and electric, awesome bass player. He first showed me Jaco. One of the first things we ever did is he showed me Donna Lee off that record. And I want to say to the bass community, and it was amazing. And I was so inspired. Oh, I loved it and understood it. But I thought it sounded like noise. I was like, this, and I was looking at him. And it was actually in a group. It was at like a little workshop. And I was probably 14. And I was looking at some other bass players who were maybe a little older than I was. And they were all like, they were feeling it, dude. The bongos and the bongos,
yeah.
The bongos, dude. And I pretended to think it was great. I pretended to love it. And I thought, this sucks. And these guys have no idea. But let me just before I am burned at the stake. Let me just say,
I don't think you'll be burned at the stake. I think it's going to be cool, man. It's going to be cool.
I think it'll probably resonate with some people that maybe truthfully felt the same way, but never would admit it. I just, of course, what I learned later is I just didn't have the ears. I didn't have the vocabulary to make sense of what was happening. I'd never heard of that song before. I'd never listened to bebop before. It just sounded random. When people say, actually, somebody sent me recently, I wish I knew who it was, but someone sent me a DM on Instagram that said, when you and Scott talked about jazz on a recent podcast, something that you didn't say, but I think is really felt by so many people out there is that jazz sounds like a random collection of notes played at random times, that for the untrained ear, and this sounds so elite when I say the untrained ear, but really it's true. If you haven't digested that material, it sounds ridiculous. It's the Office, or the American Office, right? Of Dwight and I can't believe I'm forgetting the blonde character that like is Dwight's girlfriend for a while, saying that jazz is stupid. Yeah. Just play the right notes. What's her name? It's killing me. Doesn't matter. You all are yelling it, and I can't find it. It's fine. So
I'm going
I
online.
didn't have any. But it's not your office. It's the American Office. Oh, I had it and it's gone. I hate it.
Pam Beasley?
Old. It's not Pam. Pam is like the good main character. Her name, she's blonde and she's reserved.
Angela Martin.
Is the positive way. Angela. Bang. Angela has a great moment where she's upset by jazz because she thinks that it's people being pretentious, and she yells, "Jazz is stupid. Just play the right notes." And I mean, if I'm honest, dude, that's exactly how I felt when I heard Jaco. But I saw that Jaco held up by my teacher as, well, I see, and these other students that are older than I am and have more experience, and well, he's the best, they're saying. So there must be something to that, even though I thought it sounded dumb. And then I started to read Bass Player Magazine, right? I'm seeing all of this stuff about Jaco. Yeah. And then I heard this popular talking point in the 90s that was this: anybody that plays the fretless bass just ends up sounding like Jaco. Anybody that picks up, or at least I took that from, I read a lot of things about the fretless bass and how you could have a lot of different voices on it. And I zeroed in on that, assertion that if you listen to Jaco, you will be pulled by the gravity of his genius and you will end up just being a Jaco clone. So I thought, well, I want to play the fretless bass because the fretless bass looks sweet. And I mean, and I liked Les Claypool too, right? And I liked Mick Karn. And of course I liked Tony Levin and I liked Bakiti Kumalo. And so I thought, I'm going to let those, and I also really liked Gary Willis, and I thought, I'm going to let those people inform me, and I'm going to pick up this instrument, and I'm not going to listen to Jaco for 2 years so that I don't fall into the trap.
Into the
bridge pickup. Yeah. And I mean, it was so dumb. I mean, I don't know if it was dumb, but it was what I wasn't taking into account here is that all of those players in some regard were very influenced by Jaco.
I guess.
You couldn't help it. I mean, Jaco was such a massive contribution to the world of the instrument that to try to avoid him would be like try to avoid breathing air. I mean, he was everywhere, I think, in terms of his influence. And his tone and his approach and and I just want to say, I mean, I love Jaco. And when I decided, I think I even wrote it on a calendar, Scott, starting on March.
I was going to say, did you do it? Did you manage it?
I did. Oh, I definitely did. And if anybody was ever like, hey, check out nope. I was on a cleanse, like the thing that you're doing right now, where you're not eating sugar, not eating gluten. Yes, dude, I was on the Jaco fast. I was like, I won't do it. And people were like, oh, check him out. No. And I made a very clear case for I didn't want to let in the influence because I thought it was going to be so magnetic that it was going to pull me into just jazz bass bridge pickup, zone. And
I've got this weird sort of memory of a conversation with and it was one of these I've interviewed a lot of people for the SBL, the earlier version of the SBL podcast. We interviewed a lot of people, spoken to a lot of great bass players, and I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was a fretless bass, predominantly fretless bass player. Big name, and I can't remember who it was that said it, but they said, "Oh, I actually didn't listen to Jaco for a long time because I didn't want to end up sounding like a bad version of him."
Yeah,
I think there's some validity in there, man.
Who was it? Who said that?
I can't remember.
Oh, dang!
I want to say Gary Willis, but maybe it wasn't Gary. Maybe it wasn't Gary, but I'll tell you what, he doesn't sound anything like Jaco. He doesn't. Maybe it was Gary.
You were right about that.
Maybe it was Gary.
Maybe it could have been Gary. Yeah. I mean, I bonded with you. When I saw you talk about your love for Gary Willis early, before I knew you, I was like, oh, because it just took me back to Illicit, that record Face First, actually, of Tribal Tech was probably my favorite. Face First, man. There's a tune, maybe the title track, Shoot, but I can sing that that bass line. I mean, I learned that. The thing though about Gary, and I'm sure that you'll feel this, is that the 16th note thing, maybe he didn't listen to Jaco, but Jaco permeated everything. And so that 16th thing, you could maybe even give Rocco Prestia from Tower of Power some credit for this, but that 16th thing invaded everything. And if Willis didn't listen, fine, but it still managed to creep in, because the stuff that I found that I was the most into of Gary's was actually his groove playing and less his solo playing. But when he would like lock into something, a syncopation, like an ostinato thing, that's when I was like, oh. And I just didn't know because I was on the Jaco fast that I think maybe came from Jaco's love for R&B and Jaco's love for, Motown and funk music. And then really that like aggressive, like forward leaning 16th note thing that he had. I think it was in everything.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when I do listen to Gary Willis as well, I don't really hear that much other than the sort of like he's got the 16th thing obviously locked down. Understatement. He's got that locked down. But but like in terms of like language, I don't hear a lot of Jaco Pastorius in there.
Yes.
There's some very particular licks that Jaco played, and I probably play them, like a bunch of other people play them. I don't really hear that within Willis's playing, but yeah, with Gary, it's all that to say, I'm not sure that Gary did tell me. Somebody in the past has told me that they put themselves on a Jaco fast to, I guess, just to make sure that they didn't end up sounding like a bad Jaco clone. So, and it could be Willis, it could be somebody else. What do you think about the concept of that, though? Like, broadly speaking, do you think that? Because I'm a big believer that you are going to, when you listen to people, they are going to have an incredible impact on ultimately how you end up sounding.
You're right.
Or there's a risk of that. Or maybe it's not a risk. Maybe it's actually a bonus. For me, I actually leaned into it. I was like, I like this guy, I like this guy, and I like this guy. Therefore, I'm going to listen to them all. And through osmosis, hopefully that will make its way into my playing. So
I think there's something to, of course, dude, like thinking about you are what you eat, you are what you consume.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you are what you listen to as well. It's just like how accents happen, right? I mean, if I were born and raised in England, I would speak more similarly to you. Or if I were born and raised in the South, I'd have this thing happening, but I don't. I think music is absolutely the same. It's like accent. It's just you come up and you think, oh, well, that's music. If you come up listening to jazz, you grew up listening to metal, or right, you can't help have it influence you. So I think, though, I don't know, when I look back to my 2-year Jaco fast, or my expulsion of him in my life, I will say this: when I started to consume his music, I loved it. And I then felt sort of silly or ashamed, and it's also this sort of thing of like, I love whoever said I don't want to be a bad version. That's such a great way to think about it, and a humble way to think about it, because of course Jaco is one of the greatest, right? We're never like, it's so silly as a teenager to think like, oh, I don't want to be just like Jaco. Well, yeah. Like I'm never going to be just like Jaco. I'm going to be, of course, be a bad version of Jaco. But I think that as a teenager, as an egotistical, we're all like this, I think, a little bit. We don't know what our limits are. We don't know, I was like, remember that thing? How long's Jaco been playing? 20 years? Oh yeah, I got it. Like I'm gonna be better after I've been, like I had all that stuff. I had all that like bravado, dude. We're like, how long's Victor Wooten been playing? Oh, okay, no problem. I've got time. I'm gonna beat him. I mean, that was
my number one question. When I saw a bass player, I used to like try and work out how long they've been playing. I was like, doing the math. I was like, 8 years, huh? Well, I can do that. Yeah. It's like, it's
you're
so
always just sort of positioning yourself against the time frame. And I mean, what you don't know, and it's, thank God you don't know it as a kid, right? Is that it's lifelong. It's a lifelong journey. You're never going to be better than because it's just lanes and different people have their thing. You're not thinking about your artistic voice and your lane as a teenager. You're just thinking about raw skill. You're like, how fast can I slap the thing?
Chops!
yes, dude. And you're like, it's going to be faster and better, and I'm going to win. And of course, then you get older and you go, oh, no. This is a language and I need to be working on how I speak it. But thank God we have that as a teenager, right? We've got this thing of like, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be, because that motivates you to put in the work, man.
It's funny. It's funny, but it's... Yeah, exactly. You've got to jump in and do it, haven't you? You've got to, at least for me anyway, I was just being my true self at the time, and it was, I was really competitive. And I think that it's okay to be really competitive and for that to make its way onto your instrument and try, there's like a bunch of different ways that we could take this. But I do think that just bringing it back to what you were saying earlier about the Jaco thing, I don't think maybe you didn't need to go on a Jaco fast for, I think that I think that you probably didn't need to go on a Jaco fast for 2 years, and you could have sort of like fallen off the wagon a few times. But I think for me, the more important thing to take away from it is, to your point, you are what you eat. Your playing will be influenced by who you listen to. So maybe don't not listen to people, but maybe think about who you are listening to and use that to actually guide what you're going to sound like in the future, and take things from your favorite players. I'll also say as well that I've been fascinated by this, is who I listen to on the way to a gig. Be mindful of it. Because if you are going to I'll give you a great sort of an extreme example. Yeah. If you are going to a blues gig, it's rootsy. They want you to play roots and fives, or maybe at a push, root 3 and 5 with some chromatic bits in between. But that's it, right? Sure. And you're listening to tribal tech face first on the way to the gig. It's gonna have an influence. And I actually really found this with myself. I was like, because I just basically didn't think about it. I used to jump in the car, put face first on whatever it was, right? Matt Garrison, extreme fusion craziness, and then I go to a folk gig or something. I'd be playing some folk, or I'd be playing, whatever it was. And the thing I've been listening to on the way to the gig just didn't really match with the job I was about to go and do. Right. And that really had an impact. Not a great one. It was, not a great one. It was so I started to get actually really mindful of not listening to stuff that's just on a completely different planet, or at least is going to influence my bass playing. I'm going to go into that gig thinking, Gary Willis is a god. And then picking up my bass and doing sort of like a cool covers groove, like covers band or something like that. Yeah. Just be mindful of it. I think it's for definitely worth being mindful of. Yeah.
And then also, wouldn't you say too, in this zone of you are what you eat, but then being okay with listening to the stuff that you love, because you want to sound like something. To your earlier point, that you should be listening to the things that you're excited about, that you want to emulate. Because in the beginning, emulation is that's what builds voice, right? Emulation, and I agree with you, maybe not listening to the craziest metal or fusion or whatever it is, electronic music before you show up to the jazz brunch or the singer-songwriter coffee shop.
Maybe you can do it as long as it's not going to influence the way you play on the gig.
Yeah. But to have really just to be excited about the music that you're listening to, and lean into finding things that you really love. And if you really love it, that's a great indicator that can lean into, that's going to show up then in your artistry. If you really love a certain kind of music, it's going to show up in how you play, for better or for worse, depending on the gig, right? And I think too, somebody said something to me. I did this record ages ago with an old rock band of mine, and I've talked about this maybe before, but the producer David Bendith asked me about doing sessions, He said, is that something that you want to do? And I said, yes. And he's spoke about this in terms of instruments, but it applies to music as well. He said, it's not about tolerating different things or different genres. It's not about like, oh, yeah, I can tolerate country music or I can tolerate hip hop music. It's actually about falling in love, figuring out how to fall in love with that. And he talked about it in terms of figuring out how to fall in love with a Fender P-bass with flats, how to fall in love with a Hofner, and find the lane for it, so you figure out, oh, wow, the joy is going to be choosing the right instrument or the right vocabulary for the right kind of music. And when I've talked to people about listening, and I wonder how you feel about this, I think it's really great to listen to things you love, but then I also think it's really great to listen to music not from a place of always of passion. And you're going to this is going to go against the thing I just said, but not always listening to music with like, oh, I love this, so I'm only going to listen to this. But if there's something that you don't love, why? And instead of putting all this emotional attachment to it, can you listen to a genre or an artist or something as text, as information? Can you listen like a genre that I don't particularly love is like Nashville modern country music. But when I have listened to it, I've tried to focus on the things that I think are really amazing about it, like the production, like some very sneaky arrangement things that are so smart. The bar of two that separates that last chorus from the fiddle solo, right? But thinking about it not so much as like, oh, well, I'm not going to buy this record, so that means I shouldn't be listening to it. But no, what can you gain from listening to this music that you quote unquote don't like, and use it as a study almost? And that has really applied to me anyway, in terms of session playing, so that I have my references together. But have you ever thought about music listening in that way, or does that resonate for you at all?
Yeah, kind of. I will say I'm like the worst person to ask this question to. In fact, like Josh off the Dunlop podcast asked me this. He was like, "Yeah, what kind of music do you like?" It was something like, "What's your favorite type of music?" or something around them lines. I'm probably butchering the question. Yeah, but honestly, my answer was like, kind of like everything. I know that's the shittest answer, right? But I really do. I really do. I really like. Okay, maybe not all, but like broadly speaking, like more than your average duck, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be. I know. I feel that about you.
Yeah, like I like obviously all of the normal stuff that you'd imagine, but then I really like folk. I like Irish folk. I actually like Yorkshire folk. There's different styles of folk music.
Oh,
I like country music. I love Willie Nelson. I also like modern country music. Because I'm like a guitar geek and there's lots of guitar stuff in there. I like pop music. We were talking about the Streets. I was listening to Kimbra in the car yesterday and I was thinking about the production and just thinking how incredible the production on the album. What the heck? I like Janelle Monáe. I like Adele. I like Lady Gaga. I like everybody. I mean, like where I have
you like Jaco too.
I like Jaco. I like jazz. I like Charlie Parker and everything. I really like it. I guess the sort of like the things that there's only like maybe two areas of like music that I have like a little bit of a hard time with, sort of like resonating with, and it is, and I'm going to say this, maybe regret it, punk to a certain extent.
Yeah, interesting.
Sometimes I'm just like, but it depends. It depends on, because there's some great punk bands I actually really like. Oh, but there's a particularly.
I know why you hate punk. I can't wait.
There's sort of like
to drill into that.
There's a certain style of punk that just sounds like three kind of like smelly dudes found some instruments, and they're just sort of like, and they're rebelling. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, just like, they're stinking and they're just doing their thing. And I'm just like. Could you tune that guitar up a bit? I'll appreciate that. So there's that, and then and then
we have to come back to that though.
Some like incredibly screamy metal.
Sure. where it's almost feels like hostile. Or
it's
like
it's not
super abrasive.
Screams. I'm like, just give me a melody, man. Just like
Sure.
give me a melody.
Yeah.
It's. But I do like some like not like I like lots of metal, but there's. I don't know if it's sort of like it could probably be categorized as like Swedish like it isn't Swedish death metal, but it's a subgenre of a subgenre of a subgenre of when I hear it, I'm just like, I'm not sure that's cool. But everybody else thinks the same, or like it's popular.
Sure,
but they're the only ones that really sort of.
Well, I mean, and of course you don't have to like everything. I mean, Scott and I aren't here saying like, oh, you have to like everything. I have to drill into the punk thing a little bit because I used to feel the same way when I would hear punk music.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I was like, no. And this is what I think it was for me, and I wonder if it was for you too. You've put all of this work into being quote unquote good at your craft.
Yes.
And so how the hell are these guys gonna pick up instruments not knowing what they're doing and play some crappy music? It's an affront to the work that I have done.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Like Bleach, like Nirvana's first album, right? So that was quite punky, but it was awesome because the compositions are freaking awesome. There's the compositions are great, but it's, I guess, from a compositional standpoint as well. So it's not so much the playing,
right?
Because I love like all of the early Nirvana stuff and love all of that. And the Seattle scene, like a lot of it was born, I think it was like had those punk roots in many ways.
Sure, yeah.
But there was like this compositional grace there as well.
I know.
Where there wasn't in some ways in sort of like some of the earlier like
I'm like, careful.
Yeah, I'm like tiptoeing here. Like
so funny.
Some like 70s punk doesn't resonate.
Let me ask you about this band from your homeland that is so huge, and I want to know your take because it took me a while to figure it out, or to love it, and I love it now, and I wonder how you feel about The Clash.
Oh yeah, I like The Clash.
Aha, and compositionally incredible, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's got to have that piece in it. It's got to have like it. Yeah, it can't be just sort of like. I mean, like, come on, dude.
Careful, dude. How about the Ramones?
Yeah,
dude. Okay, check this out. I just want to both of those bands.
That's where it starts getting a bit shaky.
Yes, both of those bands for me. The reason I bring them up is because I had these big arcs with those bands. I went from thinking, because I came up, I'm listening to Victor Wooten and I'm listening to prog rock and like John Petrucci and Dream Theater and Rush and and so punk, I didn't understand it, and it was offensive to me because I was like, how can you call this music if you don't work really hard? If you're not studying Neil Peart and Geddy Lee, how can you? That was my vibe as a teenager. And then what it took for me, this has always been the case, is it took a person that I looked up to or that I was a friend with or hanging out with to help me get in. To like just be around somebody. I mean, and in college that happened so much. And it happened with the Ramones in a way where I had to play some Ramones music for a thing. And I played it and it was not easy. And I thought, I have been focusing on the wrong thing. I'm focusing on the chord quality. It's power chords. I'm thinking, well, I know how to play a major 7 chord. And what I realized is, there are these structures where the post-chorus will go for 5 bars before verse. And there are these sneaky little things that made it actually very cool. And like some arrangement chops and things that made the music really compact. And that was so cool. And then I found myself singing these songs and they were really catchy. And I'm going, hold on. I've been focusing on the wrong thing, Amazing. I've been focusing on the wrong thing. And the same with like Paul Simonin's bass playing and The Clash. Like I had a tour manager who was so into the Clash, and he was like, man, no, look, you're thinking about it all wrong. And then we would sit on the tour bus and he would play Clash tunes for me. And I just needed to like have an experience with someone who was saying, no, dude, forget it. Like, it doesn't matter if they can play like Geddy Lee or Neil Peart. It's like, listen to this, listen to the conviction. Think about how they were blending reggae into the, like, think about that. And the irreverence and the bravery. And so, it just takes, I need to be led sometimes
I think I'm the
into
same,
things.
dude.
Yeah.
I think that we're all the same to a certain extent, aren't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely need somebody to school me in the world of punk. Yeah, and not all punk, like, again, a subgenre, but and the metal thing is like, not all metal. Like, I love metal.
Yeah.
But definitely that sort of like super hardcore.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't like, where's the melody? Just give me a melody.
Yes.
It needs to have something for me to hang my hat on.
I know what you mean. And I had a friend in college too that was way into the most obtuse metal ever. And what I discovered in that world is that it's not about the melody. And again, it's like reframing. It's about the visceral. It's about, it doesn't actually sound like music, it sounds like an event. It sounds like a catastrophe. And to get in touch with, you know what I mean? Like, it sounds like a car crash.
It's evoking
it sounds
something
like
else,
war. And and so it makes me feel uncomfortable, and it makes me feel agitated, and like I want to turn it off, or I want to, I want to fight or something. It makes me feel these visceral feelings, and that's pretty cool. There's not a lot of stuff that is safe to engage in that elicits that kind of response from me, and just kind of getting in touch with that and like, whoa, letting that wash over me and feel like one of the most terrifying concerts that I've ever been to was a band called the Dillinger Escape Plan. Have you ever heard of that band?
Where they all like beating each other up and stuff. Really crazy.
They just did a thing. They're incredible players. And but it is mathy metal, time signatures, start, stop, crazy. Yeah. And there was a moment where, before they started their show, they were all backs to the crowd. And then this intro happened, and then the drummer went, and it, and then
what happened? Was it just mayhem?
All of the band from the stage ran into the crowd, and it was the guitar. Now all of them are in the crowd and like flinging their necks of their instruments around, and I just remember being like, like I saw them rush the crowd. Like it was the opposite. Usually a crowd rushes something. The band rushed the crowd. And I'd never seen that before in my life. And I just remember pushing against people to get back. And, I'll never forget it. Do I want to experience that every day?
What was the band called?
The Dillinger Escape Plan. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're a fan of metal, people probably, they're a band from the States. I don't know. I think East Coast.
I'm going to check him out. I'm going to check him out. Dude, I'm going to have to bounce. I've got my wife's on the blower. She's like texting me, where are you? I'm like, I'm on the podcast with you. Guys, thanks for listening so much. We'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Don't take 2 years off of Jaco, everybody. Dive in. It's all good.
See you later, guys. Bye.
Bye.